She should have died on that trail, left torn, broken, forgotten. But when he stepped from the trees, bow in hand and fury in his eyes, fate changed. They weren't supposed to meet. They weren't supposed to trust. But survival doesn't ask permission. The rope burned. Every jagged stone, every twisted root, every frozen patch of ground carved something out of her. Blood, skin, memory. But the worst part wasn't the pain, it was the silence. The riders up ahead didn't speak, not even to curse her name. The one who'd tied the rope, Wade Lancer, only glanced back once to make sure she hadn't died yet. Then he looked away again, boots tapping steadily against the saddle as if he were on just another hunt. Lona Gray had stopped screaming sometime before dusk. Her voice had torn itself hoarse, her throat full of blood and grit. Now her lips only moved in silence, mouthing prayers to gods she'd long stopped believing in, not because she thought they'd save her, but because she didn't want to die alone. She didn't know how many miles had passed since they'd taken her. The light was failing now, dripping away between bare pines and blackening clouds. Her arms trailed limp behind her, wrists raw and caked with frost where the bindings bit deep. One eye was swollen shut, the other fogged with blood. Her legs no longer obeyed her, dragged uselessly across the dirt as her body jerked and bounced with every step of Wade's horse. They'd taken her from the station just before dawn. Shot Hank Davies, torched the storeroom, left the rest for crows. They hadn't said why. Not exactly. But Wade had leaned in close after pistol-whipping her to the floor and whispered in a voice meant only for her, "You were in the wrong place, darlin', and the wrong people noticed." She wasn't even a clerk, just helped tally supplies twice a week to earn her keep. She was supposed to be safe. She was supposed to be nothing. But that didn't matter to men like Wade, men who used fear the way others used a match, who knew how quickly it lit and how long it burned. When they finally stopped, it wasn't out of mercy, just routine. The men, 3 in total, dismounted wordlessly and set about making camp. One gathered wood, one dug a pit. Wade checked his rifle, lit a cigar, and kicked snow over the rope where it trailed back to her. Lona lay motionless. Her coat had torn somewhere in the dragging and her left boot was gone. Her foot had gone gray where it stuck out from the sock, skin splitting in places. She didn't try to move. Not even when Wade yanked the rope once, hard, and muttered, "Still breathing, huh?" The fire crackled. Meat sizzled in a pan. Lona closed her eyes, not to sleep. She couldn't, but to drift. If she drifted far enough, she could almost pretend her ribs weren't broken, that her scalp wasn't caked with dried blood, that her father's old voice wasn't echoing through her like a curse. "Don't trust any white man wearing a badge, Lona. Don't trust 'em even when they smile." But then came the snap, not firewood, not hoof, something further off. Lona didn't lift her head, she couldn't, but her heart stuttered in her chest and her ears strained through the ringing in her skull. Another snap, a shift, snow dropping from a branch, then silence again, the kind of silence that bends itself around something moving. Wade glanced up. One of the others froze, fingers half curled around a coffee tin. "You hear that?" the man muttered. Wade stood slowly. His hand drifted to the rifle at his side. "Probably a fox," he said, but his voice lacked its usual arrogance. A shadow moved beyond the trees, a soft rustle, then nothing. Then something. He stepped out like he'd always been there. Tall, still, wrapped in layers of fur and cloth that caught no light, made no sound. His bow was already drawn, an arrow notched and leveled at Wade's throat. His face was carved of dusk, stoic, severe, unreadable, but his eyes burned, not with rage, with judgment, like he'd seen what they'd done long before he arrived. The third man reached for his pistol. The arrow loosed. It sang through the air with a whisper so fast Lona thought she imagined it, until the man dropped, a wet thump echoing through the snow. The fire cracked louder. Wade yelled something, raising his rifle, but the hunter was already moving, silent, precise, faster than snow could fall. A second arrow took the second man in the shoulder before Wade even got a shot off. He fired wide, cursing, stumbling back over the saddle, slipping on packed snow. Then came the knife. The Navajo hunter moved like wind through a canyon, sudden, invisible until felt. His blade flickered once and Wade's rifle tumbled into the snow. Wade backed away, snarling, his lip bloody, fists raised. "We didn't," she was. The hunter didn't speak. He struck Wade once in the throat, dropped him to his knees, then brought the handle of his blade down across the man's temple. Silence again. The fire hissed in the snow. The hunter turned and looked at Lona. For a moment she thought he might leave, that he'd done what he came to do and now she'd be left to finish dying. But then he walked to her, slow, cautious. He crouched, one knee in the dirt, and reached out, not to touch but to see if she flinched. She didn't, couldn't. He untied the rope, lifted her like she weighed nothing, and carried her into the trees. She didn't wake with a start. There was no gasp, no bolt upright, just a slow, sinking return to pain. It waited for her like a dog at the door, loyal, patient, biting. Her ribs burned. Her jaw throbbed with every breath. Her wrists were swollen, wrapped now in something softer than rope, something that smelled of smoke and earth. She couldn't open her left eye. Her right blinked through slits of flickering orange, firelight casting long shadows across a narrow rock wall. She lay on a mat of woven grass and animal hide, a thick pelt drawn up to her shoulders. She was not cold. That in itself was startling. Voices, soft, not English. She didn't move, didn't speak, just listened. One voice was his, low, even, not harsh like Wade's had been, not sharp like the ranch hands back near the station, just calm, centered. The other voice was older. Lona couldn't make out the words, but the rhythm was like a heartbeat, measured, firm, heavy with meaning. Then silence. Footsteps. A shape entered her blurred vision. She tried to recoil, but her body failed her. It was the hunter, the one who'd stepped from the trees like judgment itself. He crouched beside her, resting his hands on his knees. His face was closer now, strong, angular, lines set deep around his mouth. He looked at her for a long time, like he was trying to decide something. "You are safe here," he said finally, the English rough but clear. "For now." She wanted to speak, but her throat closed, not from fear, from the effort. His eyes flicked to her mouth, then he nodded once and stood. Later hours, maybe, he brought her water in a wooden bowl, held it for her, tipped it gently. She coughed and the pain in her ribs lit like fire, but she drank. It was clean, cold, real, not a dream, not the last hallucination before death. He didn't speak again that night. But he sat nearby, tending the fire, adding wood without sound. She watched him through the blur, through the pain. He worked like someone who had done this before, who knew how to move with the world, not against it. The older voice came again from deeper in the stone shelter. Lona couldn't see who it belonged to. She didn't care. She was warm. Her body screamed, but she was warm. She slept. The next time she woke, it was to light. Dull gray seeped in through the cracks in the rock wall. Her blanket had shifted and someone had bandaged her leg, clean strips, tight. Her wrists too, padded and bound with strips of hide that smelled faintly of herbs. The pain was sharper now, realer, but her head was clearer. Her tongue worked in her mouth again. She tried to sit. A hand caught her shoulder. "Not yet," the hunter said. His voice didn't rise, didn't bark commands like Wade had, but it held authority, the kind that came from certainty, not force. She sank back slowly. He handed her a small cup of something warm, smelled bitter, strong. She grimaced. He didn't react, just waited. She drank. It nearly gagged her. But the heat slid down her throat and into her stomach, chasing out the ache in a slow, burning wave. "Who are you?" she managed, the words cracking against her lips. He looked at her a moment longer, then answered, "Tashiel." The word meant nothing to her, not yet. "I'm Lona," she said and coughed again. He nodded. Outside, the wind shifted, brushing snow off the rocks. Lona heard the distant call of birds, ravens maybe, or hawks. The world was still out there, still cold, still dangerous, but it wasn't dragging her across the dirt anymore. That night she sat up for the first time. Her body trembled with the effort, sweat beading on her forehead, but she made it. Tashiel handed her a bowl of thin stew, meat and root boiled down. He didn't speak much, just motioned for her to eat. When she hesitated, he showed her how to use her fingers to tear the meat from the bone. She copied him, slowly. Later, by the fire, she asked the question that had burned behind her ribs since the moment he'd stepped into view. "Why did you help me?" He didn't answer at first, just stared into the flames. Then saw what they did. That was enough. Lona blinked. "You don't know who I am." "No," he agreed. "Don't need to." Silence again, heavy but not cruel. Then a voice from behind them, old, female, firm. "You brought death to our doorstep, child," the voice said. "You owe more than thanks." Lona twisted, slowly, painfully. An old woman stood near the mouth of the shelter, wrapped in black wool and lined with gray braids that hung to her waist. Her eyes were sharper than flint. Lona didn't speak. The old woman stepped forward, crouching painfully by the fire. "Wade Lancer will come looking. Men like him do not let shame go unpaid." Lona's stomach clenched. "They'll think you ran," Tashiel said. "They'll think wrong," Lona replied quietly. The old woman grunted. "We'll see." Days passed. She healed barely, slowly. The swelling faded from her face. Her ribs held together when she coughed. Her ankle, though, refused to cooperate. She couldn't stand on it without help. Tashiel made her a crutch from ash wood, carved smooth and strong. He showed her how to use it, then made her walk, even when she cried, even when she screamed. "You want to survive," he said, "then you fight." Not like Wade had said it, not like a threat. Like a rule. So she fought. She limped to the river to wash. She peeled and crushed herbs under the old woman's instruction. She learned to clean fish, to set snares, to sew tight stitches through split fabric. Tashiel taught her how to hold a knife, not like a housewife, but like someone who planned to make it home. "You could have left me," she said one night. "I didn't," he replied. "Why not?" He hesitated. Then softly, "Because once, someone didn't leave me." She didn't press, but the fire cracked between them, and for the first time he smiled. Just barely. They were halfway through another snare lesson when the hawk call came. Sharp repeated twice, then silence. Tashiel stiffened. He stood, bow already in hand. "What is it?" Lona asked, rising on her crutch. He didn't answer, just moved, fast and low, toward the edge of the tree line. She followed. Through the brush, down a ridge, up a slope worn smooth by years of wind. She didn't need to ask. She felt it too, the wrongness, the heaviness in the air. Then she saw it. Tracks fresh, hooves and boots. 5 riders, maybe 6, not galloping, not hunting yet, but close. Tashiel crouched, brushing snow aside, examining the prints like scripture. "They're searching," he said. Lona's breath hitched. "For me. For what they lost." She looked down the trail, then back toward the shelter. "They can't find this place," she whispered. "They won't," he said. But something in his voice made her shiver. They moved before dawn. No discussion, no delay. The tracks were too close, the snow too thin, and the risk too heavy. Tashiel spoke only once to the old woman before they left. His voice was low, his words in Navajo, but Lona could feel the weight of them as clearly as if he'd shouted. The old woman didn't cry, didn't plead. She nodded once, tight and final, then handed Lona a wrapped bundle of herbs and 2 smooth stones. "For fire," she said, "and fear." Lona didn't ask what she meant. She only took them, tucked them into her coat, and limped after Tashiel as he vanished into the pale morning light. The snow crunched underfoot like broken glass. The air had turned colder again, the kind of cold that didn't sting but sank into your bones, into your breath, until even blinking felt like work. Tashiel didn't complain. He didn't even seem to notice. He moved like he was part of the land, not just crossing it. He rarely looked back to check on her, but he adjusted his pace just enough that she could keep up, limping behind on her crutch, jaw clenched, breath sharp in her chest. She didn't speak either, not for hours. When they finally stopped, it wasn't out of exhaustion. It was instinct. The trail narrowed near a frozen creek where the trees closed in and the wind funneled low and sharp. Tashiel crouched by the water's edge, scanning the surface, the tree line, the slope beyond. Then he turned to her and said, "We don't go forward." She stared at him. "Then what?" He looked up. The cliff wasn't steep, but it was slick ice over rock dusted with snow. A goat trail barely visible. "You can't be serious." He didn't answer. Instead, he pulled the strap of his pack tighter, looped a length of rawhide rope around his chest, and began to climb. Lona stood frozen for a moment, then swore under her breath and followed. It was slow, agonizing. Her ankle screamed with every angle change, every twist. Her hands went numb twice before she'd even cleared the first ledge. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. Not with Wade's face still lurking behind every tree in her mind. Not with the memory of being dragged across frozen earth like refuse. Not with the feel of the firelight back in the shelter still ghosting across her skin. She climbed because she didn't want to lose that warmth. Not again. By the time they reached the top, the sun had broken through the clouds. The sky turned sharp and colorless like glass about to shatter. Tashiel offered no congratulations, just pointed toward a set of high boulders and moved on. Lona collapsed behind one, her chest heaving, limbs trembling. But she didn't cry. She wouldn't give that to the pain. Instead, she stared out over the trail below, half expecting to see Wade and his men appear like phantoms in the trees. They didn't, not yet. Tashiel crouched beside her and handed over a strip of dried meat. She chewed slowly, the salt and sinew awakening something raw in her gut. "How far can they track?" she asked. "As far as they want," he said. "Then we can't stop." He nodded. That night they didn't build a fire, too dangerous. Tashiel made a cold camp, stones stacked to reflect heat, furs layered tight. They huddled beneath a narrow overhang, pressed close not out of affection but necessity. Lona didn't sleep much. Every twig crackled like footsteps. Every owl call sounded like a curse. But sometime past midnight her body surrendered and she dreamed. Not of the men, not of Wade. She dreamed of the river. She stood waist-deep in water, warm and dark, her dress heavy with silt. Across from her stood a child, barefoot, hair like hers, eyes like her father's. He didn't speak. He just watched her, and when he turned to leave, he bled. She woke with a gasp, hand clutching her chest. Tashiel was already awake, sitting, watching the trail. "You dreamed," he said without looking at her. "Yeah," she whispered. "How did you?" "You cried." She turned away from him. "Sorry." "Don't be. Dreaming means you're not dead." The next day the world changed. It started with smoke. Thin, almost invisible, but it curled against the sky like a whisper. Tashiel saw it first, his shoulders stiffened. "Camp," he said. "Yours." "No." They circled wide, climbing again, pushing west. Lona's ankle buckled twice. Tashiel caught her without comment both times, hoisting her to her feet with a grip like stone. She didn't thank him. She didn't need to. They both understood what hung in the balance. By midday, they found the source. A second camp, small, new, and abandoned. The fire still smoldered. The snow melted in a wide ring around it. Tracks led off in 3 directions, boots, hooves, something heavier. Lona crouched beside a patch of broken brush. Her fingers touched the edge of a torn piece of cloth. Red. The same red Wade had worn at Bitter Station. "They're close," she whispered. Tashiel didn't reply. He pointed to the east trail. "That one." "Why?" He picked up a rock, turned it over in his hand, then dropped it. "Because that one's a lie." They followed the middle trail, weaving through pine and ash, dodging brush so thick Lona's coat snagged on thorns more than once. Still, they moved faster now, silent, alert. The rhythm between them had changed. No longer rescuer and rescued. Now two fugitives bound by something unspoken, the certainty of pursuit. Then came the tree. A single birch, tall, smooth, and nailed to its trunk a strip of leather. Blood-stained. Lona's stomach twisted. Tashiel touched it once, then turned. "They're marking," he said. "Why?" "So we know." "Know what?" He looked at her. "That they're done pretending." Nightfall brought thunder. Not a storm, horses. A distant pounding, muffled but steady, too many to count, moving fast. Tashiel pushed them harder, leading them down into a ravine, across frozen marshland, through a narrow passage between stone ridges. They didn't speak. Lona's breath turned ragged. Her vision tunneled. Her ankle gave again, and she nearly screamed. But she didn't. At the far end of the ravine stood a split in the earth, narrow, dark, jagged. A canyon, barely a body wide. Tashiel entered first, vanishing into shadow. Lona followed, scraping her shoulders on the stone, her fingers groping for anything to hold. Inside it was black. The kind of black that swallowed thought. Tashiel's hand found hers in the dark, guiding her through turns, over stones, under low drops. They moved by memory, by instinct, by the beat of their hearts. When they emerged, the sound of the horses had faded. But only for now. Tashiel didn't stop. He led her up a ridge, through a cleft in the stone, and into a small hollow where the wind couldn't reach. Then he turned and looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "They'll kill you," he said. "I know. Even if I die first. I know that too." He stepped closer. "Then you must choose." "Choose what?" "To run." Lona stared at him. Or maybe he meant something else. Because in his eyes she saw something older than warning, something heavier than threat. Resolve. Not for escape, but for war. She didn't ask what he meant. Not yet. Not as the wind curled around the rocks above them and the scent of smoke still clung faintly to her coat. Tashiel didn't repeat himself. He turned from her the moment the words left his mouth and began digging into the rocky hollow, clearing out dried leaves, smoothing snow, checking for signs no animal or man had passed through. He moved like time mattered differently to him. Like moments didn't need explanation, they needed action. Lona watched him, her mouth dry, the throb in her ankle still a low drumbeat under every heartbeat. "You said I had to choose," she said finally, her voice thin but steady. "But you didn't say what the choices were." Tashiel didn't look up. Run, hide, keep going, or turn. Turn back. No, he stood now, brushing his hands off, his expression unreadable in the fading light. Turn toward them. There was no fire that night, no stew, no conversation. Lona sat in silence while Tashiel worked through the dark, setting tripwires with branches, digging shallow hollows to muffle their footprints, scattering pine needles in ways she didn't understand until he whispered, "Deer pass here often. Their trail hides ours." She wanted to ask what he meant by turning toward them. She wanted to ask why she felt her pulse jump every time he looked at her, not out of fear, but something sharper, something that felt like being seen for the first time. But the question stayed locked in her throat. Sleep came brittle and short. She dreamed again, this time of Wade's voice. He wasn't shouting. He was singing, some slow, tuneless thing, off-key and low. She was back on the rope, back on the ground, but her body didn't hurt. It was stone. She couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't even blink. And when she looked up at the horse, Wade wasn't riding it. It was Tashiel, staring down at her with those same still, silent eyes. But he didn't help her. He turned the horse and rode on. She woke with a jerk. Sweat soaked her shirt. Her hands trembled. Tashiel wasn't beside her. She sat up too fast, the cold biting instantly, and nearly slipped on the rocks. But before she could call out, she heard it, rustling, soft, and rhythmic. When she limped toward the edge of the hollow, she found him crouched beside a thin stream, fingers dipped in water, murmuring something in a language she couldn't follow. A prayer, maybe, or a memory. He didn't turn when she spoke. "I think I want to know what you meant." Now he looked up. "About the choice." "Yes." He rose slowly, water dripping from his fingers. "You can keep running, maybe make it to a town, maybe find someone who will take you in. Maybe Wade never finds you again, but maybe isn't enough. Not now." Lona swallowed. "And the other choice?" "You make them stop chasing." "How?" Tashiel took a long breath. "By making them bleed." It hung between them. Not a threat, not even a promise, just truth, as simple as hunger, as deep as the cold. "I've never killed anyone," she whispered. "You came close." She blinked. "What?" "When I found you, you were nearly dead. That is killing too. What they did." His voice went quiet. "It was war. You survived it. That makes you a warrior, even if you didn't ask to be one." Lona looked away, ashamed by how much those words lit something in her. Later, when the sun broke faint over the ridge, Tashiel led them west, not away from the tracks but toward them. He said nothing, but his silence had changed. No longer the quiet of patience. Now it was calculation, a storm tightening before the first drop of rain. They moved fast, weaving between brush and stone. Lona's ankle had begun to strengthen, enough that she could manage short bursts without the crutch. Her shoulder ached, but it no longer stabbed. Her bruises faded from black to yellow. When they crested a ridge by midday, they saw smoke again, but this time not a trickle. A column. Straight, steady, controlled. A camp. Tashiel crouched low, studying it. Lona did the same, her breath catching. She recognized one of the horses. The tall one with the white blaze, Wade S. He was there. Tashiel counted quietly under his breath. 5 horses, 4 men, 2 tents. Lona felt her stomach twist. "So that's not all of them." "No. We can't take 4. "No," he said again, but his eyes didn't leave the camp. She watched him, heart hammering. "So what do we do?" He looked at her. And for the first time he asked, "What do you want to do?" She couldn't answer right away. What did she want? To run, to vanish, to be safe? "No, not anymore. I want them to know they didn't win." He nodded. That was enough. That afternoon they prepared. Not weapons, though Tashiel checked and sharpened his knife, checked the string on his bow, ran his fingers over each arrow's fletching with the care of a sculptor. But the real preparation came in the details. Lona gathered moss, packed it with snow, dug shallow pits just off the trail, not deep enough to trap a man but enough to slow a horse. She watched him smear a mixture of ash and dirt across his face, hands, neck. "Reflection gives you away," he explained. Then he handed her a pouch. Inside, dried berries, a folded piece of flint, and something wrapped in a scrap of rabbit skin. "Don't open it unless you have to," he said. "What is it?" He just looked at her. "Fear," he said. They waited until dark. The camp below came alive in golden flickers. Men laughed. One played a harmonica badly. Meat crackled on a spit. Lona could smell it and it made her stomach clench. But she wasn't hungry, not for food. When the moment came, Tashiel didn't give a signal. He just stood, walked, and vanished into the trees. She followed. What happened next blurred between silence and screams. It started with a horse panicking, stepping into a false trail and crashing to its side. The man riding it tumbled, shouting, gun half drawn before an arrow took him through the thigh. Then smoke, not from their fire. From behind. Lona had lit one of the pouches, tossed it into the rear tent. It caught like dry straw. Another shout, then chaos. Tashiel moved like shadow. Lona barely saw him, just heard the crack of a bowstring, the hiss of breath, the grunt of impact. She ducked behind a tree, heart beating so loud it drowned the fire. A man rushed past her, rifle drawn, eyes wild. She stepped out, hit him in the face with the rock she'd carried since morning. He fell, cursing, gun skidding away. She didn't kill him, but she made sure he wouldn't walk for days. Then came Wade. He emerged from the smoke like the nightmare he was, eyes narrow, mouth twisted in rage, his coat scorched, his voice a roar. "Where are you?" he bellowed. "You think this ends here?" Lona froze, then stepped out of the shadows. "I know it does." He didn't hesitate. Raised his pistol. Fired. Missed. An arrow took him through the forearm. The pistol fell. Then Tasha was there between them, blade drawn. But Lona raised a hand. "No." She stepped past him. Wade was on his knees now, snarling, blood pouring down his arm. "You think you won," he spat. "You think you're better than us." "No," Lona said. "I think I lived." She turned and walked away. Tasha didn't move until she did. Behind them, Wade's screams followed through the trees. But they didn't turn back. They didn't speak for hours. The night air was split open by Wade's screams, but neither of them turned back. The fire burned behind them, wild, hungry, and the wind caught it, sending embers spinning into the trees like angry stars. Lona didn't flinch. Not when the sky glowed, not when branches snapped behind them, not even when the sound of hooves thudded once far off and then went still for good. Her face stayed forward. Her feet kept moving. And beside her, Tashiel didn't so much as blink. They walked until dawn, until the last of the orange sky faded to silver blue and the air lost its bitter bite. They stopped near a stream tucked between stone bluffs, where birds stirred in the brush and small things moved in the undergrowth, unaware, or uninterested, in the blood that stained Lona's sleeves. She didn't notice it at first. Only when she went to wash her hands did she see how red the water turned, how slow it flowed from the fabric of her coat, how much it clung to her wrists. "Not mine," she whispered. Not a question, just a statement of disbelief. Tashiel said nothing. He was gutting a rabbit in quiet, precise motions. The knife moved like part of his hand, smooth, no waste, no hesitation. Lona watched him for a moment longer, then knelt, plunging her hands deeper into the stream. The cold was a shock that helped, not enough to chase the weight in her chest, but enough to remind her that she was still flesh, still breath, still here. When she sat beside the fire, he handed her a piece of meat wrapped in hot stone and bark. She didn't eat right away. Her stomach turned at the smell, not from the meat, but from the memory, smoke, screams, the hollow thunk of bone against rock. "I could have killed him," she said finally, her voice low. "I wanted to." Tashiel didn't look up. "You didn't." "Should I have?" He turned now, met her eyes. "I don't answer those questions." "Why not?" "Because they're yours to live with, not mine." Lona stared at the fire, then nodded. After the meal they moved again, south this time, toward the red canyons where the rocks bled rust and the air turned dry. It was slower going, her ankles still weak, the trail narrow and winding. But it felt different now. Not like running, not like surviving, more like crossing into something new. By the third day, her bruises had faded to dull yellows and browns. The cuts on her wrists had closed. Her strength was coming back, but with it came something else, something heavier. A tightness that coiled behind her ribs and made sleep feel thin and shallow. She didn't dream anymore. She didn't cry either. But she watched the trees like they might open again, like someone else might step out, not with help, but with revenge. Tashiel noticed. One evening, as the sun slipped behind the canyon walls and their fire-sent shadows flickering up the stone, he handed her something strange, a piece of leather, folded and bound with a strip of blue cloth. "What is it?" she asked. "A name." She looked at him, confused. "In my people," he said, We earn new names when we survive, when we become something else, when we change. She turned the leather in her hands. What name is it? I don't know, he said. That's not for me to decide. She stared at the flames. After a moment she whispered, then what if I don't know either? You will. That night the wind howled. The stars came out in clusters so bright they hurt to look at. Lona sat with her back against the stone and watched the sky, her fingers curled around the strip of leather. She didn't sleep, didn't move, but she didn't feel tired, not like before. And in the morning, she told him she was ready. Ready for what? Tashiel asked, though he already knew. To stop running. He studied her face, looking for the cracks, the doubt, but there was none. Then we walk. They did. South into the red rock, across dry creeks and scorched paths, past mesas that rose like bones from the earth. They passed no riders, no towns. Only once did they see smoke far off, but it smelled like juniper and cattle, ranchers maybe, not hunters. Lona asked no questions. Tashiel offered no answers. They spoke little, but they walked side by side now, not one leading the other, and that small difference changed everything. On the sixth night, they reached a rise overlooking a wide basin. Tashiel stopped. This is it, he said. Lona looked out. Nothing moved. No camps, no wagons, just dry brush, stone, and the glint of a small river winding like thread across the valley floor. What is it? She asked. The place I buried my brother. The words landed heavy, without warning. Lona turned slowly, but his face was unreadable. It was a long time ago, he said, before the soldiers came, before the roundups. She waited. He was sick. We didn't have medicine. My father went west to find help. He never came back. My brother died the next day. I carried him down and buried him near the bend in that river. Lona stared at the distant water. I come back once a year, to remember to speak. To him. Tashiel nodded, and to myself. Lona looked down at her hands, at the faint scars on her wrists, the dirt under her nails. I don't have a grave to visit, she said, but I think I still need to speak. He didn't ask to whom. She didn't say. They camped in the open that night, no fire, just stars. Lona sat with her knees pulled to her chest, staring out over the valley. When she finally spoke, her voice was so soft even the night had to lean in to hear it. I lied to you. Tashiel didn't move. I told you I didn't kill anyone, but I did. He said nothing. I had a sister, Mary. She was younger, sweet, too soft. She believed people were good, even Wade. She paused, breath catching. When he came to our ranch the first time, she said he was just lonely, that he didn't mean the way he looked at us, that he'd move on. Tashiel's eyes were closed now, but he listened. He didn't move on, he came back, with men, took the horses, burned the barn. My father was gone off buying cattle. It was just us. She swallowed. I told her to hide. I told her not to move no matter what, but when they started hurting me, she came out. Lona looked up, blinking hard. She hit one of them, just a boy, younger than me. He wasn't cruel like the others. He hesitated. That's when I got the knife. I didn't think, I just swung, caught him in the throat. Silence stretched long. She screamed when he fell, not because she was afraid, because she loved him, even then. Lona's voice broke. She never looked at me the same after that. Tashiel didn't speak, but when she stopped, he reached into the pouch at his side and pulled out a small stone. He held it out. She took it without asking. He didn't live, she whispered. No, he said, but you did. They rose early the next day, crossed the basin. Lona knelt by the river bend, said nothing, left the stone. It wasn't for Wade. It wasn't for the boy. It wasn't even for her sister. It was for the version of herself that hadn't survived, The girl who died the moment Wade tied the rope around her waist, the one who'd never walk back home again. That girl deserved a grave, even if no one else would dig it. As the sun climbed higher, they moved on. And far behind them someone watched. Not Wade. Not one of the men who'd burned the barn. But someone worse. A man with a scar across his cheek and a letter tucked into his coat. A bounty hunter, silent, professional, and paid handsomely. He'd found the tracks. He'd seen the camp. He knew where they were headed. And this time he wouldn't miss. The wind changed before the warning came. Tashiel stopped first, not with a word but with his body stiffening like a wire pulled taut, eyes on the ridge behind them. The air shifted, cooler, drier, and quiet in the wrong way. No birds, no rustling leaves, no animal tracks along the river. Only stillness, like the world was holding its breath. Lona felt it a second later, just as she knelt to refill their water skins. She paused, cupped hand hanging over the river, and slowly lifted her head. "Is it him?" she whispered, though she already knew Tashiel wasn't looking for Wade anymore. Wade was finished. What came next would be something colder, smarter, someone who didn't burn barns for show or chase prey out of rage. "No," Tashiel said, low and certain, "not Wade." He crouched beside a bent patch of grass, fingertips brushing the soil. His eyes narrowed. 3 days old," he murmured. "Rider, heavy horse, light pack, no smoke, no fire ring, nothing left behind." "A tracker." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Lona stood, eyes scanning the ridgelines. "Is he following us?" "He's watching, waiting." "For what?" "For us to lead him somewhere." The skin on the back of her neck tightened, like a town. Tashiel nodded once. "Or a camp. Or a grave." They moved again, but now their path bent sharper, carving back into the red rock canyons where echoes made lies of sound. Tashiel veered into stone gullies, walked the stream beds, doubled back twice in a single hour. Lona followed in silence, her limbs heavy, her breath sharp in her chest. There was no more room for talking. Not here. Not when someone hunted them with the patience of frost. By dusk, they reached a narrow alcove carved into the canyon wall, a slit barely wide enough to squeeze through. Tashiel vanished into it without hesitation. Lona followed, scraping her shoulder on the rock, her body bending in ways it wasn't meant to. The passage twisted once, then opened into a hollow basin tucked entirely from view. A natural hideaway. Lona leaned back against the stone, heart thudding. Tashiel didn't speak until he'd checked every corner. "We'll stay here tonight," he said. "No fire, no noise." She nodded. "And tomorrow?" He hesitated. "We give him what he's waiting for." Lona stared. "You want him to find us?" "I want him to think he has." She didn't argue, not anymore. Instead, she sat down against the rock wall and watched the sky fade from rose to indigo. The stars came out slow, cautious. The air held a chill, but not bitter, not yet. She wrapped her coat tighter around her and tried not to think of the man who rode alone through the wild just to drag her back to whatever waited behind that bounty notice. But she couldn't stop her mind from painting him. Not Wade, loud and arrogant. This one would be lean, methodical. The kind of man who read tracks like scripture and didn't blink when the blood spilled. That night, Lona didn't sleep. She listened. Every gust of wind, every shifting pebble, every distant owl call. It all stretched tight across her nerves like a thread about to snap. She counted heartbeats, imagined him stepping out of the dark. Cold eyes, cold hands, rope. She didn't cry. But when the first pale light reached into the hollow, she stood without a word. "I'm ready," she said. Tashiel nodded, then handed her a small leather pouch. "Salt," he said, "dust it on your boots, makes the tracks break sooner." She did as told. When they emerged, the sun was full in the sky. Their trail led deliberately across the ridge, clear, readable, too clean to be anything but bait. Tashiel moved fast now, not dodging, not hiding, just walking like a man unafraid to be seen, and behind them, somewhere out of sight, the hunter followed. By midday, they reached a plateau where 3 gullies met like fingers. Tashiel paused beside a cluster of tall stones and pointed. "There," he said, "that's where he'll come from." Lona looked back, "And if he does?" "He will." "Then what?" Tashiel turned to her. "Then you don't hesitate." Her fingers tightened on the pouch of salt still in her pocket. "I won't." They waited behind the rocks. Time passed slowly. The sun arced higher. Lona's breath turned dry in her throat. Her legs ached. Her ankle throbbed, but none of it mattered, not now. She heard the hoofbeats before she saw him. Slow, deliberate, not charging, not careless. A figure emerged from the trees. Dark coat, wide hat, rifle across his back. The kind of man who didn't flinch unless he had to. His eyes scanned the trail, then narrowed slightly at the scuffed boot prints, the scraped branch, the faint drag mark from Lona's limp. He smiled, then dismounted. He didn't pull his gun, not yet. He just began walking. Tashiel stepped out first. The hunter froze, hand brushing the rifle strap. "I don't want her dead," he said calmly, "just returned." "You're not taking her," Tashiel replied. "Not your call." Lona stepped out then, her voice sharp. "It's mine." The hunter's eyes flicked to her. He didn't smile, didn't even react. "You're worth a lot to the right people, miss, and some of them don't want you back breathing. So why not kill me here?" "Because I get more if you're not bled out, and I don't like mess." "Too late for that," she said. The man moved then, too fast for someone that calm. His rifle was halfway drawn when Tashiel's blade flashed, not toward his chest. Toward the horse. The animal reared, screaming. The hunter spun, distracted for half a second. Lona moved. She threw the salt. Not at his eyes. At his feet. The ground shifted under him. Loose dust, slick stone, he stumbled. Tashiel closed the distance in an instant. The fight wasn't long. It wasn't clean either. There was blood. There was breath stolen and given back again. When it was over, the hunter lay gasping, face scraped, arm twisted beneath him, rifle gone. Tashiel stood over him, not triumphant, just still. Lona crouched beside the man, her voice quiet. "You could have just let me disappear." He coughed, "Then I wouldn't get paid." "Who sent you?" He didn't answer. She pressed one hand against his broken wrist, just enough. He winced, lips tightening. "Who?" "Crowley." She blinked, Wade. "No, his cousin, richer, meaner, thinks you embarrass the family." Lona stood. Looked at Tashiel. He waited. "What now?" she asked. Tashiel turned to the hunter. "He'll ride back or he won't." "You'd let him go." "We're not murderers." The hunter smiled through the blood. "You sure about that?" Tashiel didn't answer. But they left him there, not tied, not gagged, just beaten, disarmed, and bleeding into the dust. And if he got up and followed, well, they weren't running anymore. That night, Lona dreamed for the first time in days. But this time she wasn't on the ground. She wasn't bleeding or begging or silent. She stood, alone, in a valley of bones and fire, and she walked forward, barefoot, unafraid. When she woke, her heart was steady. The next morning, they didn't turn toward the towns. They didn't search for safety. They walked toward the canyon rim, where the land broke open and stretched west like a promise. Tashiel didn't speak. But when he stopped, he turned to her. "There's a village beyond that ridge," he said. "Navajo, they don't trust outsiders." "Will they trust you?" He nodded. "Enough." "And me?" "That's your part." Lona looked at the sky. It was clear, too clear. A storm was coming. But not today. Today they walked. The trail to the village cut through ridges that twisted like folded paper, each turn narrowing until the world seemed to collapse inward. Stone to either side, steep and sun-bleached, cast long shadows across the path. Lona said nothing as they walked, her fingers tracing the edge of the leather pouch still tied at her waist. The salt inside had dried to a fine powder. She didn't know why she kept it. Maybe as a reminder, maybe as a warning. By midday, the canyon widened, and she saw the first signs of life not carved by wind or time. A circle of stones deliberately arranged near a spring, ash scattered over old fire pits, wood stacked neatly along the base of a cliff. No fences, no gates, just quiet signs of people who had learned not to leave anything soft for strangers to steal. The village emerged like a breath held too long. Low clay structures nestled beneath the cliff face. Smoke curled from vents in the roofs. A child ran behind one of the buildings and vanished. Somewhere close, a drumbeat echoed faintly, slow, methodical, steady as a heartbeat. Tashiel raised a hand but did not call out. Instead, he waited. The wind passed. The dust settled. Then from the shadows, a woman stepped into view. She wore a robe the color of clay and a necklace of turquoise stones that flashed when they caught the sun. Her face was lined with age, but her eyes were sharp, not suspicious, not angry, just precise. She said nothing as she approached, then stopped a few paces from them. "Grandmother," Tashiel said with a slight bow. Lona blinked. "Grandmother." The woman did not nod, but her eyes moved to Lona. "She is hurt," the woman said, voice calm as if stating the weather, "and hunted." "Yes," Tashiel said. "She brings danger." "Yes." "Then why bring her?" Tashiel looked at Lona. "She is walking forward." That seemed to satisfy the woman. She turned and walked back toward the village. No invitation, just expectation. Lona followed without question. The village was silent but not still. People moved like water, quiet, flowing, watching. No one spoke to her, no one smiled, but no one turned away either. Children peeked from doorways. Men nodded slightly at Tashiel. An older woman handed Lona a clay cup filled with water. Another brought her a shawl. By sundown, they'd given her a place to sit, a bowl of stew and space enough to breathe without fear. She ate slowly, her hands still trembling even though she hadn't realized they were. Across the fire, Tashiel sat with a group of men, speaking low and quick in a language she didn't know. Every now and then he looked at her, not with concern, with steadiness. She didn't belong here, not really, but no one said it aloud. That counted for something. That night, the elder woman led her to a low shelter built into the rock. "You'll sleep here," she said. "You may hear drums, do not fear them." Lona nodded, "Thank you." The woman's eyes lingered. When the spirit is torn, the body grows restless. We speak to both. Lona didn't know what to say. So she said, "I understand." The woman turned without a word and left her in the quiet dark. Lona lay on the mat, staring at the ceiling. The earth was warm beneath her, the air dry and still. She could hear the faint drumbeats in the distance, constant, even. She closed her eyes and tried to let the rhythm pull her under. It didn't. Instead, she remembered the boy. The one she killed. His eyes when he fell, not angry, just surprised. And her sister's voice, screaming not from fear but heartbreak. Lona pressed her fists to her chest. She didn't sleep. At dawn, she rose and stepped outside. The village stirred slowly. Fires relit, water hauled, tools sharpened. She walked to the far edge where the land dropped away into a wide basin. No one stopped her. Maybe they trusted her now, or maybe they were waiting to see what she'd do next. Tashiel found her there. "You didn't sleep." "No." "You're not done." "No." He nodded. "There's a man who can help you." "I don't need help." "Not for your ankle," he said, "for the rest." She turned to him, Will he forgive me? No, Tashiel said simply, but he'll show you how to carry it. They walked together down a narrow path that led away from the village. The sky was clear, the air warm. Lona felt the sun on her skin and realized it had been days, weeks maybe, since she'd felt heat without fear behind it. They reached a hut set apart from the others, half buried in stone, draped with hide and feathers and something that smelled faintly of cedar smoke. Inside, the air was thick and warm, filled with a low chanting. The man who sat in the center was old, so old his skin looked like bark, and his hair hung in a single long braid down his back. He opened his eyes as they entered but did not speak. Tashiel bowed. She has come. The man nodded once, then gestured to the space before him. Lona hesitated, then knelt. He didn't touch her, didn't ask her name, just looked. And after a long moment he said, "You carry death." "Yes. But it is not the death that marks you, it is what came before it." Lona didn't respond. "You were dragged," he said. She flinched. "You were not broken, but you were emptied." She closed her eyes. "Now," he said softly, "you must choose what to fill the space with." He picked up a small bundle of herbs and lit them. Smoke rose in thin lines. He began to chant again, low, rhythmic, almost a hum. The air thickened. Lona didn't understand the words, but she understood the weight behind them. She let herself breathe. Let the pain rise sharp, full, real. And for the first time, she let it stay. She cried. Not like before. Not in fear or desperation. But in mourning. For Mary. For herself. For the part of her that would never come back. When it was over, the man placed a small carved figure in her hands. A bird, wings open. Not to fly, he said, to remember how. She left the hut without speaking. Tashiel waited. She's ready, the old man said behind her, but the world is not. Back in the village, there was movement. A rider had come. Not the bounty hunter. Someone worse. Elijah Crowley. He sat tall on a blood-red horse, flanked by two others all dressed in fine coats and polished boots that didn't belong in this land. He didn't raise his voice, didn't demand, just waited. He didn't need to ask who she was. The people stepped back, but they didn't scatter. Tashiel stepped beside her. "This is Crowley?" he asked. Lona nodded slowly. "Wade's cousin." He studied the rider. "He has the same eyes." "But colder," she whispered. Crowley smiled then, and called out across the quiet. "Miss Lona, you've wandered far." She said nothing. "I'm here to take you back, not for justice, mind you. There's none of that left for you, but the family name deserves its theater. And you, well, you'll be the curtain call." Lona stepped forward. "Your cousin murdered my sister. And you murdered my brother." He didn't stop him. "Doesn't matter." Crowley dismounted. Slow, smooth, confident. "I'll give you one chance," he said. "Come with me quietly." She felt the bird in her hand. Felt her fingers tighten. Tashiel moved slightly in front of her. Crowley raised an eyebrow. "This your new keeper?" "He's not keeping me," Lona said. "He's standing with me." Crowley nodded slowly. "That's sweet." Then he drew his gun. The village didn't move, didn't scream, they stood like stone. And from the edge of the cliffs, the drums began again. Louder this time. Faster. Tashiel didn't wait for the first shot. Neither did Lona. They moved together. The first shot didn't come from Crowley, it came from the man behind him. A warning maybe, or a mistake. It hit stone. Lona didn't flinch, she was already moving. Tashiel swept a cloud of dust into the air, and one of Crowley's men went down hard, coughing and blind. The second gunman raised his rifle. Fired. The bullet grazed Lona's shoulder, tearing fabric and skin. She barely registered the pain. She was focused on Crowley, still standing, still calm, knife in hand, watching her like a man who expected to win. "You think this ends with me?" he called. Lona didn't answer. She threw herself forward, grabbed the fallen pistol, and fired before he reached her. The shot landed clean. Crowley staggered, blood blooming across his coat. But he didn't fall. He kept coming. Another step. Then his knees gave out, and he crumpled into the dirt, breath catching once, then not again. Tashiel stood over him, silent. The remaining gunmen fled. No one chased him. The people of the village didn't cheer. They simply returned to their lives. Lona stood over the body. For a long time she didn't speak. "He would have kept coming," she said softly. "I know," Tashiel replied. That night they buried Crowley in the rocks. No marker, no name. At dawn, Lona packed what little she had. The old woman pressed a small wooden bird into her hand. "To remember who you were," she said, "and who you're becoming." Tashiel walked her to the ridge. "Stay," he offered once. She shook her head. "I can't, but thank you." Then she turned west, toward the horizon. Not to run, to begin again. And behind her, tucked beneath her coat, the carved bird rode with her, wings open, always ready.